Okay, let's just take a deep breath and see where we are. It's been a whirlwind few days, as we all know, and frankly, I need to calm down. My missus would be really annoyed if I died of a heart attack because of the EU. Actually, would she? Probably not. Anyway, as we can see, the FTSE sprang back above 6,300. It's pulled back a bit since, but isn't it funny? Whenever something bad happens in the economy, you always see articles like this one. Brexit fears wipe 100 billion off FTSE in 4 days. Business live. But when the FTSE recovers, you never see the opposite article. 150 billion added to the value of FTSE 100 companies in the last week. Well done, Britain. You never see that, do you? The pound is also on its long march back to where it was. If you're savvy, you'll ride the increase in the pound, and it could make yourself a good few quid. I'm long the pound at the moment, and I've already banked a few quid, as well as a few other stocks. But of course I can't give you financial advice because of the EU finance rules. Actually, maybe I can. Well, it now appears that there appears to be a plan of the way forward, although nobody's really come out officially and told us. And despite that we were originally told by Spamface Cameron, the pig lover, that he would invoke Article 50 this week, the plan appears now to appease the Remain whingers, and that they're looking to put off invoking Article 50 possibly for a few years. I heard someone suggest that they're gonna invoke Article 50 just before the next scheduled general election in 2020. The idea of this, of course, is to make us all forget that we ever had an in-out referendum in the first place, now that humans have an attention span shorter than goldfish. The so-called elite of this country are desperate to keep us in the EU and will literally do anything, from financial collapse to terrorist attacks. Anything at this moment is on the cards. And as I said very eloquently in my last video, calling for a democratic vote to overturn the result of a democratic vote to keep us in an anti-democratic union is just insanity. This is what the whinger Remain losers are calling for, and the calls are getting louder. The issue for the so-called European elite is that once other countries are seeing that the UK is in fact doing okay or even thriving outside the anti-democratic EU, then these countries will demand an EU referendum of their own. And this is beginning to happen. And do you know what? It scares the EU elite shitless. The thought of the gravy train coming to an end and them not achieving their long ambition of a United States of Europe literally gives them nightmares. Take Neil Kinnock as an example, a man of the people a few decades ago fighting the establishment. Well, when he left British politics, he went to work for the EU. He made it as high as the Vice President of the European Council and has since earned tens of millions of pounds between him and his wife, who was also given a gravy train bureaucrat job with the EU. They were on mega money and they've got mega pensions. No wonder they both campaigned to keep their gravy train going and to stay in the EU. And by the way, in order to continue to receive their lavish pension, they have to continue to promote the EU. Kinnock's son, Stephen, also promotes the EU. And by the way, he wanted to stay in the EU despite the steelworks at Talbot, which is his constituency, not being able to make British firms use British steel because of EU competition rules. Unbelievable. Funny how people change, isn't it? But we now have 34 referendums being demanded by different countries for a variety of reasons within the EU. They're referendums from voting on stopping mass importation of migrants to their own Brexit referendum. The EU is all but finished. Also, early next year, Merkel and Hollande are both up for re-election. I wonder what will be left of the EU for us to remain in, even if the democratic will of the majority of the people was overthrown in a blatant act of authoritarian disregard of democracy and the will of the people, and we had a second EU referendum. Now I know personally I don't believe there will be a second referendum, but if we did, I'd like to think that the Leave majority would be even higher the second time round. But then of course the democracy-loving Remain whingers would demand a third referendum, ad infinitum. Until of course they got the result they wanted, then the voting would just cease, never to be voted upon again. This is a tactic of the EU and its cronies, as we've seen recently in the Netherlands, France and Ireland to name a few, who ran a referendum that failed to get the correct result for the EU first time round, and they were forced to have another one. Let's just see how this goes. The EU is destroying the economies in Europe. That's no secret. It's stifling growth. How long before we see scenes like this in Europe again? We'll even see scenes like this in Manchester, London, Birmingham, if we do not allow the will of the people to prevail. We had a referendum, Leave won. I can't believe the radio stations and the mainstream media. They continue to push the idea that they can have a second referendum, or that the Leave deal is going to be watered down, or that we're just in fact never going to leave. We need leaders to step forward and grab this mess by the scruff of the neck. And we need to start calling up these bloody radio shows and telling them how it is. The ratio of whinging Remainers to pro-Brexit callers must be 4-5 to 1. And most of the Brexit callers are now allowed on air because they regret their decision. We voted to leave. Let's stay friends with Europe, but let's get out of the most anti-democratic union since the Soviet Union.